Now, I believe tomorrow it's a year since Kosovo officially applied to start the process to join the EU. Now, a lot has happened in the last year, but where are we in this process? What status is this application at? Has there been any movement in the last 12 months?
Well, it was last Friday.
It was
last Friday, 1 year from the application. Prime Minister Kurti has submitted the application in Prague on December 15th of 2022. So we had assumed that the response from the Council will come much earlier. However, the problem is that the second half of 2023 was chaired by a non-recognizer that maybe did not see many incentives to move the process ahead. We believe that on our part, we are ready to undertake this new adventure. We believe that Kosovo institutions are much better prepared to start the accession talks than all other members of the Western Balkans at the moment when they were awarded the candidate status. Our key disadvantage turned to be our advantage because we were implementing the SAA for more than 6 years, and this has helped us build capacities. But what needs to happen first is that Commission assesses our capacities before the accession talks are opened. But for this, they need the signal from the Council. We hope that the Council will find the strength now under Belgian presidency to build that unity around our integration process. So what happened so far is that due to the 5 non-recognizers, EU still kept this individual position on recognition, so there's diversity and recognition, but they still were able to build unity on supporting Kosovo's EU integration path. After the war in Ukraine, I think the integration of Western Balkans has gained in geostrategic importance, and we need to see this also converted into real decisions. It makes no sense to declare accelerated integration as a strategic goal and still have one country that is struggling to get the candidacy status.
You mentioned the challenges of the Spanish presidency due to it being a non-recognizer. Now we have Belgium for 6 months, but then followed by Hungary. Although they recognize Kosovo, there are other challenges that persist there. And I'm wondering, what do you foresee in the next 6 months under the Belgian presidency, and what perhaps might you foresee in the subsequent 6 months under Hungary?
So ideally, we will have this process of moving, let's say, our application from Council to Commission during the Belgian presidency. It will be in line also with the promises on the Europe side on all integration processes of the Western Balkan countries. However, we don't expect that Hungary will have a negative stance when it comes to Kosovo's integration process. For your information, despite all the animosities that Hungary might have caused to the EU in the decision-making in the last months or years, when it comes to Kosovo, they have supported our EU integration path. Actually, in my cabinet, I have one advisor on EU integration that has been seconded by the Hungarian Minister of Foreign Affairs. So I hope that this spirit of support will be then integrated in the Hungarian presidency when they take over on July 1st.
And we saw in the summit last week in Brussels, there was progress with Ukraine, with Moldova, with Georgia, with Bosnia and Herzegovina as well. With Kosovo, no. And Kosovo is one of the most pro-EU countries in Europe, along with Albania. How does this frustrate people? You know, they're very pro-EU, and that there's this constant waiting, sort of waiting in line and seeing other countries progress. I'm not saying they don't deserve to, but does this frustrate people?
Well, it frustrates people, of course. It frustrates also the business community. It frustrates the policymakers. But frustration should not be the basis or the starting point for our policymaking. So we have to navigate in the situation that we are faced with, and we have to find the best outcome under those limitations that we face. First, we fully support the EU decision to grant or to open accession talks with Ukraine. And I think this will be an important input also in the efforts that Ukraine is putting to win this war against Russia. When Ukraine wins the war, all EU has won. When Ukraine loses the war, all EU has lost. In this context, everything that can support these efforts will be appreciated and supported by Kosovo. However, we believe that at this point, granting of this opening of accession talks to Ukraine and Moldova has to some extent contradicted the basic approach of meritocratic progress towards EU. Because as you clearly mentioned, if meritocracy or own merits do matter, Kosovo will be on the forefront. But then we hope that the same principle or the same cohesion that could be built on Ukraine will be built soon also on Kosovo, because the situation in Kosovo is even more complicated than in Ukraine. Kosovo is inside EU. It's not on the periphery of the EU, it's inside EU, since all Western Balkan countries are surrounded by the EU countries. But inside, Kosovo is isolated because it's the only country in Europe that does not border with any EU member. So we border with Serbia, Montenegro, North Macedonia, and Albania, none of them currently an EU member. This further complicates the situation, and also on security aspects and others. That's why we deserve some specific attention in this context. Second, the accession talks to Ukraine was given mainly to support the current political situation and the war. In Kosovo, we have a better situation. We can use the accession process to prevent conflict. And this is easier, and it brings much more benefits, and it is less costly. So now we are discussing hundreds of billions of euros to support winning the war in Ukraine, while with much less we can prevent the war in the region. And the additional problem is that while still the conflict between Russia and Ukraine is a bilateral conflict, there could be no bilateral conflict in the region, in the Western Balkans. As soon as you have a conflict, it will easily spread to the neighboring countries. So the potential negative consequences will be much larger than in the case of Ukraine and Russia. That's why it's of paramount importance for the EU to recognize this and act upon this recognized reality.